clean streets, because I am lucky enough to live on one of the cleanest blocks in the North End. And there's something very unusual about my block. It is almost entirely owner-occupied, and there are very, very few blocks like that in the North End. We have people now investing in this neighborhood from Arizona to Indonesia. Any thoughts you have on dealing with the problems of absenteeism in this neighborhood would be most appreciated.
So, that's a great question. And, you know, I missed the days when everything was owner-occupied. It was, you know, the lady who owned the store on the first floor also lived in the building, and the people who worked in the store lived in the building. And, you know, things have changed, and we have a lot of absentee landlords. Again, 400 Hanover Street, I'll say it out loud to the camera, is a joke. Airbnb, in and out all day. I have no idea who's living next door to me. There are piles of garbage bags in front of that building. We used to do something when I worked for Sal, and I'm not sure, I was looking into it the other day, and I think it still is, something that is active, but I'm not sure how active it actually is the Brown Property Task Force. I know the mayor's office does something along those lines, and it was really formed to kind of identify certain properties in neighborhoods where there was a lot of drug dealing, a lot of prostitution. But in this district, when we were having issues with students, Councilor Ross at the time put this group together, and we met on a regular basis when I was working for Councilor Martina, and we basically would send a letter to the home to Arizona, and you're right, sometimes it's a management company, and we would just put them on notice and say, hey, this is unacceptable. Next time ISD will come down, next time, you know, we're going to come down, we're going to inspect it, you know. So there are ways to reach the property owners. It's very difficult sometimes. I mean, there was a building across the street from my house for years that we had a hard time with. We could never find, my mother and father could never find who owned it. We could never get in touch with that person. But I think maybe a problem property task force, a really powerful problem property task force with, you know, other district councilors or other councilors at large and other departments, maybe, you know, Public Works and ISD, you know, and really dropping the hammer on enforcement. Like Lydia said, we don't do a very good job enforcing anything. Don't block the box, the yellow tickets or green tickets, whatever they're called. So I would be, I'm a big fan of the Brown Property Task Force.
I agree that we need to make sure that absentee landlords are held accountable. And I think it's not just sending them letters and not just trying to communicate with them when they're not there. It's really just getting to the point that if you enforce a certain level, you start to tax them. You start to punish them directly and make sure that they are having to pay their fair share. And there's a whole process if they don't pay those taxes that the city can slowly begin to own that property. And that's what happens. If anybody else here didn't pay your taxes, by the way, the city could go into that process. So I think we really need to be very aggressive with that. I think it's the problem property owner, it's almost on a website that DND was doing where they literally shamed them and would put a picture up there and say, who owns this? And for people to be able to post and actually put them out there on what we would say on Front Street and say, you need to do something about this. I think that we need to not only enforce, but really talk about how we're going to put it on them to actually pay, not just a fine, but you need to improve to fix this mess. And then also, I mean, it's a matter of safety too, right? If you're absentee and across the street from me is an abandoned house, when I see someone coming out of the house, I call the police. Because I know that there's no one living in that house unless they're up to something, unfortunately, not very good. And so it's a matter of safety too, not just of cleanliness, that we also need to look at these properties and make sure that we're holding them accountable. I think finally, I mean, on the flip side, that's dealing with the person and the owner already being absent. I'd love to see the city start to really push for more owners to be occupied and come up with policies and make it easier for home ownership. Looking at rent-to-own programs and looking at ways in which we're actually creating new pathways in which folks can begin to own in the North End. I'm 36 years old. So a lot of folks my generation, either they're going to pay a certain amount of rent, it gets to a certain level, and they're gone. They can't afford to stay in the city. And I'd love for us to be really investing in creating more owner occupants in the city of Boston. And I'll get into some more policies about that in another question.
One of the reasons that you're seeing so many landlords that are from, Arizona, New York, Texas, Indonesia, is because currently the way the city of Boston is set up, purchasing property here is an amazing investment. And one of the reasons it's an amazing investment is because we're not regulating Airbnbs. A few years ago, Airbnb was mostly the person who had a spare room or a couch, and it was spread out throughout the city, and there was a variety of price points. Nowadays, and I've spoken with some specialists who are working at City Hall about this, it's a small number of people who are investing in real estate, purchasing large numbers of units, and are hiring a property management company to manage them and are constantly turning them over and treating them like hotels. And the fact is, if it's going to be treated like a hotel, we should regulate it and tax it like a hotel. And first of all, that would have the effect of giving notice to these faraway owners that this isn't as simple as writing a check. You are going to be held accountable. I'd like to see these units actually be inspected by the fire department, because I think that if you have someone who comes in and throws a huge party, there's a high potential that something could go wrong, and it's not their house, they're not worried about it, but we certainly are. But if it was set up that this was more regulated, you would see that the number of owners who are purchasing for the intention of turning it over as a Airbnb would fall significantly. Being able to purchase a home is incredibly important, not just to young people, but to anyone. This is a hot real estate market for a variety of reasons. We're seeing a lot of people who had children, who are empty nesters, who are now coming back to the city, and that's great for them. Currently, the city wants to build 53,000 new units of housing by 2030, and there's no goal in there for workforce housing. And that's housing that's not luxury, but is more expensive than affordable. And I would like to see more of that built, because a lot of what you're seeing that's purchased up by foreign buyers is luxury housing, because that's what plays well on the Airbnb market. And workforce housing is where people have the ability to purchase their first home. And I'm getting done. So I'll shut that.